Okay, class. I'm kind of resetting the video here. This is part two of our videos on the 4-2 assignment. Where we left off, I was talking a little bit about this next video. Attribution appears in the track 2, topic 2. But for those of you in that track and topic, real quickly, I just want to mention attribution is seen as a personality variable. We'll learn later in the course that people that make certain attributions have certain types of personality traits. It comes from a social cognitive theory on personality. So anyway, the point I want to make here is that we can measure attribution in this way. You'll see in research that groups are shown an ambiguous situation and asked to attribute the cause of that situation to either an individual actor in the situation or the circumstances. So that kind of plays on what we know in psychology as attribution theory. We often are faced with ambiguous situations and we have to try to figure out what caused them. And we typically either make individual attributions or situational attributions. So, okay, enough of that. Let's move on and let's talk about the other two tracks and topics and some potential designs that you might have there. I want to take a look back at our tracks and topics list here. We'll even blow it up a little bit. Okay. So our next one is going to be track 2, topic 1, childhood experiences. We can see in this track and topic some variables that they're already using in the research that you're looking at. They're looking at birth order as a variable. They are looking at childhood attachment as a variable. And then the outcome variable that they're looking in the first and the third article are personality. So they're using this 5-factor model of personality again. And in this article, they're looking at siblings' perceptions of the personalities of their siblings from different birth order. Second article wasn't a huge, it was more of a theoretical article, so it's not a huge help to us in kind of coming up with a research gap. But let's take a look at some possible research gaps for this track and topic that you could use. Scrolling down a little bit. So we saw that they used attachment as a childhood variable. You could use some other childhood experience as a predictor variable of personality. So, for example, you could look at what is the effect of physical abuse as a child on later personality traits. Unfortunately, we still have this as a problem in our society, and we have to research it. We could look at the effect of socioeconomic status in childhood on later personality traits. We could look at the number of childhood friends you have in childhood on later personality traits. We could look at children that have an experience of divorce on later personality traits. So there's a number of childhood experiences we could kind of think about that we know are potentially problematic for kids. And we could look at how it affects their personality. We could look at all the big 5 traits, or we could just focus on just one trait. So you have some flexibility with that. But those are just some ideas I came up with, after reviewing those articles. Another way to maybe look at this track and topic in terms of a research gap in a hypothetical study would be we could use personality disorders as a variable. So we could look at, what's the impact of our childhood attachment style with our parents on, whether or not we develop a personality disorder later on. What's the effect of our birth order on whether or not we come up with a personality disorder? So again, I'm really just kind of swapping out some different variables and coming up with some new combinations of things that you could use for a hypothetical study. It's sort of up to you. Your end of the deal here is to figure out what that kind of a study might look like and how you might measure some of that stuff and how you might recruit people and how you might manage some of the ethical concerns. But I'm just trying to get students in the class focused on some concrete ideas they could use and kind of use as a jumping off point. Let's take a look at the last track and topic. You'll see the articles that you read for this track and topic. What they usually have is some comparison of two cultures. And they're looking at, how do those two cultures differ on aspects of personality. In this one, they looked at cultural differences in interpersonal flexibility, which is a personality feature. And the second one, they looked at the difference between American individuals and Chinese individuals on how they make attributions. So they're looking at attributions as a personality variable here. And the third one, they're comparing different cultures on, how does extroversion appear in each of those cultures? Is extroversion something that, is sort of a phenomenon that occurs across different cultures? So the main thing to think about as you're coming up with your research question is, maybe I ought to compare some different cultures on different personality features. One that I've always been sort of fascinated with, I used to work in Mississippi in a pretty rural area, but I'm from Cleveland, which is a pretty urban area, Cleveland, Ohio. And I always found, like growing up in these different backgrounds might have an effect on personality. I never actually did a study on it, but one of the questions that we might think about here is like, do people from a rural background differ in the trait of extroversion than people from an urban background? We could sort of hypothesize that people from an urban background have to deal with more people and have to be a little bit more extroverted. But we don't really know until we, actually do the research, right? Otherwise, it's just kind of reckless speculation. But that's a hypothetical study you could maybe do here in this track and topic. We could look at different ways of defining culture. In some ways, people in the GLBTQ community, might be part of a different culture and have different experiences in that community than people who identify as heterosexual. So we could maybe compare those two cultures and see how they differ on the variable of openness to experience. A third thing we could do hypothetically is look at maybe Latinx communities. Do individuals who identify as being from a Latinx community or identify as Latinx, do they differ in personality traits than individuals who aren't from Latinx communities? I don't want to risk making generalizations about each culture, but this is kind of how cross-cultural research looks in personality research. We try to figure out if there are things that are distinct about different cultures as we sort of look to understand different cultural experiences out there. So, the goal of this type of research is not to stereotype cultures, but I think to understand them a little bit more fully. And, you'll find in psychology that we didn't always start out this way, but since I've been alive anyway, there's been much more of a movement to embrace diversity and not to pathologize diversity, which is a good thing. Okay, lastly, just another idea I had off the cuff. If you want to use attribution as a variable, if you were kind of into that article on attribution, you could just compare two different groups. So you could, compare how do American citizens attribute an ambiguous situation, or how do Swedish citizens make attributions. Again, there's not a whole lot of necessarily big literature based on this. I kind of just made this up. But it does fall within this track and topic. And so, again, I just want people to kind of be creative, and you can feel free to be flexible in how you, identify a research gap or come up with a research question that you want to use for this 4-2 assignment. So between these two videos, I've tried to cover everything I can possibly think of that might be helpful to you and with a degree of brevity. So I hope you enjoyed listening to it. And again, as always, feel free to email me questions you have as you develop, your research question or your hypothetical study. And we can, if there's any issues, we can fix them along the way and help you do a better final project. Take care.